The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. Bringing you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
Jets and Texans playing on Thursday Night Football.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, well, Big Sarge, when the schedule came out, I think a lot of people had this game schedule circled on the calendar as a potential matchup between two of the top teams in the conference. One of the teams has lived up to the hype, the other not so much. Let's start with the team that has lived up to the hype, the Houston Texans. What's going on in Houston this week?
One of the things that has been going on in Houston is after the Sunday's game against the Indianapolis Colts, where the Houston Texans won 23-22, improved to 6-2 on the season and take a commanding lead in the AFC South. The offensive line and the second half scoring is still a problem. For as many weapons as the Houston Texans have, and I know that they've been without Nico Collins for a couple of games. They've been without Joe Mixon for a couple of games. They missed Tank for a couple of games. Wide receiver Stephon Diggs got hurt in this game, and he is unfortunately out for the season with a torn ACL. But the Houston Texans in games scored games with one score or less to win the game are 5-1. And when you have such a potent offense who is supposed to come in and just blow everybody away with the amount of talent that they have on the offensive side of the ball, they haven't gotten it done. And they are scoring 9.5 points in the second half. And so they're getting what they need to get done in the first half. They're just not making the second half adjustments as far as offense is concerned. And that may be an offensive coordinator issue. Maybe Bobby isn't making the necessary adjustments and coming out and giving the same looks to the defense. CJ Stroud, when I asked him about it on Tuesday, he said it's something that we definitely have to work on. DeMeco Ryans has talked about it in the past. But one of the biggest issues outside of the offensive scoring in the second half, some of the injuries that we talked about, they sustained injuries on the defense side of the ball. It's just, John, it's the offensive line. I mean, the offensive line is the most glaring problem that the Houston Texans are having right now, being able to protect CJ. They're not giving up a ton of sacks each game, but their quarterback pressure and everything that's around them is starting to cause CJ Stroud, it's starting to cause him to have happy feet sometimes, something we're not used to seeing, especially after his record-breaking rookie season that he had. It's starting to cause him to have some choppy feet, some happy feet, seeing some ghosts. And that's something that the Houston Texans, they remember when they had David Carr here. I think he was sacked one season 76 times, and he just looked uncomfortable in the pocket. And you don't want C.J. Stroud looking uncomfortable in the pocket, especially someone who has the talent to be a first ballot Hall of Famer if he continues on this trajectory. And I mean, I don't have to tell you, you get to talk about a first ballot Hall of Famer all the time as far as the quarterback position is concerned. But that offensive line has to be better. And it starts looking at Kenyon Green, left guard. He was out after his rookie season. He sat out his second year. He missed the entire year due to an injury. He's coming back this year. And so he's now playing in this Bobby. He's played 8 games in this Bobby Slowick-led offense, but he was pulled last week against the Colts for performance. And one of the things about him was he took accountability and said that it was his fault. But John, it isn't just Kenyon. They have an entire offensive line issue, and they have an interior line issue. So Kenyon hasn't looked good and hasn't looked good a lot of times. Center Juice Scruggs hasn't looked good a lot of times. And right guard Shaq Mason, who we expected to be better, a 10-year veteran, Super Bowl champion, they just can't seem to pick up the stunts and the delayed blitz that are coming at them like that, which also at times you can see Titus Howard, right tackle, and Laramie Tunsil, left tackle, struggle. And so that offensive line unit is the biggest issue and the most glaring issue that the Houston Texans have right now. And going up against a front four like the New York Jets have, you don't want to have that type of communication issue, that type of performance issue when you're going up against if I'm not mistaken, the 4th-ranked defense in the NFL.
Sarge, let me ask you, how are things looking on the defensive side of the ball for the Texans?
The defense side of the ball, they have listen, and although they have sustained some injuries as far as at the linebacker position, it'll be another week. I think this is the 3rd game, if I'm not mistaken, without Azeez Al-Shaair, middle linebacker, who was a key free agent pickup for the Houston Texans in the offseason from the Tennessee Titans. Him and D'Amico have great chemistry together from their time in San Francisco. He's the quarterback of the defense, but the one thing about having a player coach like D'Amico, and I mean like a player, former NFL player / coach, and I mean players coach as well in D'Amico Ryans, is that at that position he can help build up. He can coach up, any player, and they're getting Henry To'oTo'o back as far. He set out with a concussion, and so Kamari Lassiter, the rookie cornerback, he had set out with the shoulder injury. He came back on last week, and so they're starting to, when you look at the linebacker position, they picked up Devin White 2 weeks ago. He's getting a lot of playing time. Neville Hewitt has stepped up. Jake Hansen has stepped up at their linebacker position, and so they look better. And I said all that because we know about Derek Stingley. I'm very interested to see this matchup as far as how Derek Stingley is going to play on one side of the ball, and your all-pro cornerback on the other side in Sauce Gardner. I'm curious to see how they're going to take each other's game level up because of their competitiveness. And so rookie Kalen Bullock at safety has been good. Now, you notice I talked about the linebackers, I talked about the cornerbacks, I talked about the safety, the rookies, I had to save the best for last. That defensive line unit is amazing. I'm talking about amazing. I'm talking about a destructive force. I'm talking about will impose their will on anybody. And look, that's pun intended when I say impose their will, because NFL rookie defensive player of the year for 2023, Will Anderson Jr. is having a career year. He's currently tied at 3rd with 7.5 sacks, which he only had sacks for last season, for all of 2023, for all his rookie year. And so it starts with Will, and on the other side of Will is Danielle Hunter, who is top 5 in quarterback pressures, had double digits in quarterback pressures last week against the Indianapolis Colts with 12, had 2 sacks. And so when you have Will Anderson Jr. coming at you from one side being destructive, when you have Danielle Hunter coming from the other side being destructive, that leaves a lot of room for that interior defensive line to eat. And now you got Tim Settle, you got Foley Fatukasi, you got Khalil Davis, you got Danico Autry back, who they also use as a defensive tackle and a defensive end sometimes. And I mean, they just have a unit, a defensive line unit that is, as Danielle Hunter told me last week after the game, he said, we're 4 people that move as one, and we're always going to move as one. And so that's why I say the defensive line unit for last, because they are by far right now the heartbeat of the entire Houston Texans team.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if they win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. And that winning $5 bet could come from an NFL game in Week 9 with their quarterback on deck to return. The New Orleans Saints are big favorites over the lowly Carolina Panthers. FanDuel has the Saints 7.5-point favorites in Charlotte this Sunday. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Could it be the 2 best teams in the NFC?
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I mentioned the Lions 3.5-point. Can you think of a time 3.5-point favorites in Lambeau, and both teams were good? I I don't know that that's happened in our lives.
No, I can't either. And again, I know it's been the last 2 years, and certainly that was that Week 18 stunner and ending Aaron Rodgers' career. But Lions went into that game an underdog as well.
I think every year I have found a reason since it happened. So 2021, not that long ago, but still, probably every month or two, I will bring up what Dan Campbell did in that week. Was it week 18? Were there 18 weeks in 2021?
Yes.
Where he's throwing fake field goals and reverse passes, and they did everything in a game that did not matter to them, but was a cultural marker for them to say, this is what we're going to do. I've said on this show, I've said on radio interviews, I've written at The Leap, a newsletter I would love for everyone to subscribe to, that especially if it's Malik Willis, that's the game I want to see Matt LaFleur call. That is the game where you say, we're going to empty the chamber, everything in our back pocket, we're going to be digging out old Nike bags, trying to find plays. Let's see what we can do, because I love that opportunity. This is going to be a banged up Packers team no matter what, even if everyone plays. I think they're going to be hard pressed to win this game. I want to see the creativity from Matt LaFleur on full display. And it is such a credit. I have to take the biggest L on Dan Campbell, because I was wrong. Like, I was flat out wrong about Dan Campbell. And now I want the Packers to imitate that plan, even though they're a 6-2 team. They're a good team, but they're just really banged up right now.
I agree with you. I do think these are the best two teams in the NFC, and you want to see both teams at full strength. I'm excited for the Thursday game in December when the Lions and when the Packers come to Ford Field. I mean, there's a lot of storylines here, and you look at the NFC and how wide open it is after what happened with the Commanders last week and everything else. Yeah, these are probably the two best teams in the NFC. Very well coached, very well drilled. Both defenses are better. I think what'll be a key for the Lions, I mentioned before, Sam Laporta, middle of the field. Not having Jamison Williams out there didn't matter last week against the AAA Titans. I think they are. Let's be honest. That poor guy, Callahan, has no. Where are we going?
He's got no clue.
He's not ready to be a head coach. But this week, without Jamison Williams, I think the Packers maybe, like you said, load the box a little bit, because they know that threat of number 9 running down the field is not there. But I do think that Laporta sneaking by and maybe Ben Johnson gets him in a one-on-one with a linebacker or two, could be the difference in this game. He has not had a breakout Sam Laporta 100-yard game yet. Yeah. He's had some good games, but he was kind of held in check the first few weeks, similar to how Kelsey was in Kansas City. This could be that game you find Laporta. And another one, too, is first outdoor game for the Lions this year. And the only one they're going to have until December, when they have to go to Chicago and San Francisco back-to-back. How will Jake Bates handle it? The young rookie kicker from the UFL has been really good. You know, Dan Campbell likes to go for it anyway, but if he sends Bates out there, he's been great. And it's tough to kick in Minnesota, and he did. But again, first outdoor game, you wonder how that will go. And if there's a miss or two in there, if that could prove to be a costly for the Lions. How about on your side?
Yeah, well, two things on that. The Packers are 26th in DVOA defending tight ends this year. They've had some problems with it. Part of that is because they've been playing a lot of cover 2 lately behind blitz looks. So they'll send those pressures and then they'll drop into cover 2. Well, the part of you want to attack in cover 2 is that seam. So you get tight ends down the middle. Trevor Lawrence had a couple gorgeous plays throwing to the tight end in those kinds of situations. The other part of this, Matt, is it's going to be in the 50s. It's going to be rainy as of the forecast right now, which can affect the kicking game. What was the first thing Dan Campbell said when asked about going to play at Lambeau? Have the right shoes. This is perpetually a problem for opponents. Viking fans they're still crying about 2022 when they were frauds and they went into Lambeau and got their doors blown off because they kept slipping. And they're like, well, we were slipping. Like, okay, right. Cool. Have the right cleats. But this is, I think, part of the Packers' path to victory is Jahmyr Gibbs puts the ball on the ground. You get Jared Goff and his tiny hands. Ball slips out of his hands in his his throwing motion, something like that. Like, create a little bit of variance in here. Create a little bit of fun. These are both two teams that are good at creating takeaways. I think the Packers have to create some takeaways for this team because they're just too potent offensively to think you're going to get them to punt 8 times. You're just probably not going to do that. So you've got to create some takeaways. For me, that's the key. And third downs. The third down stats, some of these stats, Matt, are crazy. The Packers passer rating on third downs, opponent passer rating is 20 points better than the next best defense right now in the NFL. They're third in completion percentage. They would have the best third down defense in Green Bay by conversion rate since 2006. So that's another key here, to not extend drives, the turnovers and the third downs. That's something the Packers are really, really good at this year defensively. If they can exert their will there, they can win. You go first. You go first with a prediction.
I really, to be quite honest, normally I'm ready to rock on this one. I agree with you on high scoring. I think the Lions, obviously the offense has been great. Without Aiden Hutchinson, we haven't really touched on it much. It's Josh Pascal and who knows whom. I think Brad Holmes will make a move before Tuesday to bring an edge rusher in here, whether it's,
do you have a name?
Maybe it's Darius Smith, who hates the Packers and hates the Vikings. So, hey, he's going to get to play them twice a year.
Yeah.
That's possible.
I don't know about the culture fit there with Dan Campbell personally.
I don't either. Arden Key could be a guy. What if the Saints and Cam Jordan agree? Yeah, I know I said I was going to retire in New Orleans, but y'all suck. And I'm going to go up with my friends, Dan and Alex and Aaron.
Yeah.
And Glenn, Alex Anzalone, all the guys in New Orleans he knows. That would be a great fit. Calais Campbell could be a minor move.
Chase Young even in New Orleans too.
Yeah. So, although I don't know if Chase Young, who after his jogging routine against Jahmyr Gibbs last year in the NFC Championship game, fits the Brad Holmes model, but there's going to be somebody that's coming. It's just a matter of the fit. Brad Holmes is very particular on what he wants to do, but that could be an issue. Is too much time for the quarterbacks. And watch Taylor Decker too. Lions left tackle has not played well the last few weeks, and these are good edge rushers that you guys have, and keep an eye on that one too. You mentioned maybe Golf puts it on the turf. I think it would be if Decker first play of the game last week, Decker let Arden Key go right around him. And it was like, wait, what's going on here? So hopefully Taylor plays better. But I'll take the Lions and I'll say a 34-27 final.
All right. I like that. I think Jordan Love is going to play. It's hard to know for sure about the other guys. I think Jai Alexander is going to play as well. I think the Packers can ham and egg it here together. I think 30-27. Packers cover 3.5, but lose the game. I certainly could see the Packers scoring enough points in this game to win. I would love to see a one-off game plan from Matt LaFleur is what I'll say all week. Have a couple special things ready for this team, but that's just not really been the Packers' MO under Matt LaFleur. So we'll see if that's how it goes. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if they win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. And that winning $5 bet could come from an NFL game in Week 9 with their quarterback on deck to return. The New Orleans Saints are big favorites over the lowly Carolina Panthers. FanDuel has the Saints 7.5-point favorites in Charlotte this Sunday. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast.
So with the Falcons hosting the Cowboys, Marcus, I'm going to be, a gracious host and allow you, the co-host of Locked On Cowboys, to talk about what's going on with this Cowboys team this week. And, my hope as a Falcon fan is one thing that isn't going on with the Cowboys is the triumphant return of Micah Parsons. So maybe you can give us an update on that, because if Micah Parsons plays in this game, the Falcons will have no answer for him, even if he's at like 72% or whatever he is coming off his injury. But, what are some of the big issues going on with the Cowboys, and will we see Micah Parsons this week?
So outside of the fact that the Cowboys just aren't very good, they've got injuries all over the place. And let's start with Micah Parsons, because that's the big one. They really haven't been able to get any stops at all without Micah Parsons on the field. Last week, there was no player on their team that recorded multiple pressures outside of Chauncey Golston, who had 2. They have no pass rush without Micah. He's not going to play this week. He didn't practice Wednesday. He's really not all that close to playing. Maybe he'll be ready for the Week 10 matchup against Philadelphia. This has always been a 6 to 8 week injury, and we're on week 5 of it right now. He's not going to play. Now, the other interesting thing is, do the Cowboys have corners in this game? Trayvon Diggs, their star outside corner, he's dealing with a calf injury, did not practice on Wednesday. I do think he'll probably play, but Deron Bland, their all-pro cornerback from last year, he's dealing with a Liz Frank injury. I've got some concerns that he's not going to be ready to practice or to go this week. Did not practice on Wednesday at all, has not played this season. And with the Cowboys only have 3 all-pro players on defense, and if all 3 of them were to miss this game, I just don't see how they get stops on that side of the ball.
Well, I will say this on Micah Parsons. Rest up, Micah. The Cowboys need you for some of these divisional matchups. You don't need to go out there and play against the Atlanta Falcons. What do you got to do at this point in time? So, it is a devastating blow if the Cowboys cannot get some of their key playmakers back this week. Obviously, with the Falcons coming off a red hot performance against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we'll sort of see if they can pour it on this Dallas defense that has struggled mightily this season. But, is this Cowboys offense good enough to kind of carry the team? And potentially if we get into a potential shootout with this Falcons offense, can they win that way with the defense down so mightily?
That hasn't been the case so far this year. And maybe one of these games it'll click. It's in a dome in Atlanta. Maybe the Cowboys offense just goes off, but we've been waiting for that all season long. They just haven't had one of those games where everything is clicked. They can't run the ball. They have one weapon on offense in CeeDee Lamb. Again, I have some confidence that it eventually will get figured out, that the offensive line, the young offensive line will start to mesh. But until it happens, you can't predict that it's going to be a week where they finally score 30 points. I mean, you look at that 49ers game. I mean, it was a struggle for them to get 20 points. It didn't happen until the very, very end of the game. I just don't see that happening yet. And with Zach Martin dealing with a back issue, elbow issue, I don't know how the Cowboys are going to get this offense off the ground.
And I guess, Marcus, big picture stuff, you bring up Zach Martin, the best guard football, future Hall of Famer, from what I've seen watching the Cowboys this year, and obviously I haven't watched as much as you have, but he feels like a shell of the great player that he once was. And it kind of just feels like a microcosm of the Cowboys, where it's like, this was kind of, last year was their all in kind of year. And this year, it was kind of we're going to run it back and see if we can catch, lightning in a bottle, I guess. And it just doesn't seem to be going the Cowboys' way. And are we in the midst of this whole thing coming apart, or do you feel like this team can find a way to sort of, revivify this 2024 season?
So I'm going to answer your second part of your question first. This has always been a soft rebuild. Jerry Jones went on a local radio station a couple of weeks ago and laid out the case like, hey, we just didn't want to spend any more money on this version of the team. We've spent a lot over the last couple of years, and we're kind of paying, I don't want to say paying for our sins, but you get the idea. Like, this is going to have to be the year they reset their cap. So I do think at some point in this year, they're going to start to play better football. But does that mean they're a contender or they're going to make the playoffs? I don't see it unless they were to happen to steal a couple of these games, like this game against the Falcons or the Eagle game next week. I don't see that happening. As for Zach Martin, you're right. The last 2 weeks have been arguably the worst games of Zach Martin's career. You can see he just doesn't move the same. I know he's dealing with multiple injuries right now. I also wonder if his heart is still into it. I mean, you just don't see the same energy out of him. This is what happens with older players. I mean, he's played a lot of football. He's started to get banged up the last couple of years. You'll see number 70 out there on Sunday, but it's not the same all-pro player that we're used to seeing.